Good afternoon / good morning. We are here from the Right Side Broadcasting Studios. This is the pre-show for the Sean Spicer press briefing live from the White House. We will bring you coverage of that at, well, it's 2 p.m. Eastern is when he's supposed to start, which is 35 minutes from now. And this is the pre-show. We cover all the press briefings from the White House. We always do a pre-show and a post-show. And happy to be here today. I am Steve Lookner. We'll talk about some of the questions Sean Spicer will be asked, some of the issues he's going to talk about. And also, we would love to hear your comments on these issues and the things Sean Spicer will be asked about. So if you'd like to write in during the pre-show, give me a shout. Go to my Twitter, @Lookner, @LOOKNER. Direct message me there, or email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. What else? What else can I say? Yeah. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about some of the things that Sean Spicer might be asked about today. And I think, well, there's a bunch actually. There's a number of things I would like to discuss here. So one thing is this whole. Well, tomorrow President Trump is supposed to announce his tax plan or some sort of tax plan. He said last week that next Wednesday I'm going to have a big announcement on taxes. I think he said on tax cuts. Well, tomorrow's Wednesday. So that will happen tomorrow, and there's a lot of speculation on what he's going to propose. But actually, it's more than speculation. We're hearing a bunch of reporting. So I've seen the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Politico all do reporting on this. It came out yesterday that President Trump reportedly is going to ask for a corporate tax rate cut. The current top tax rate for corporations, I don't know if it's top or all. Maybe it's for all corporations, it's 35%. But he's going to lower that tax rate. He's not going to. He's going to propose lowering that tax rate to 15% from 35%. But some more information came out about this proposal. And remember also, so there's this tax proposal, but also as part of, actually, let me take a step back here. There's the tax proposal, and then there is the spending bill that needs to get passed this week. So just on the tax proposal, what we've heard is that President Trump is going to propose cutting the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%. Also, it was reported today in Politico that reportedly President Trump is going to include in this tax proposal, he's going to include infrastructure spending and spending on child care. I had read child care tax credits. The idea would be that by including infrastructure and spending on child care in this corporate tax cut proposal, that could get some Democrats on board. And there's different reasons President Trump might want to get Democrats on board. If he's using that special budget reconciliation procedure, he doesn't need Democrats on board, but maybe he doesn't want to use the budget reconciliation procedure and just pass and attempt to get this bill passed the normal way. And if you're going to try to pass a bill the normal way, you need some Democrats on board, because you really need 60 votes in the Senate, because Democrats can filibuster, and you need 60 votes to break a filibuster. So President Trump, if this is all true, would be proposing a corporate tax cut, but also putting some spending in the bill to get Democrats on board to make sure the bill gets passed. There's these technicalities about the reconciliation process we could get into, but let's for now let's stay. We can get into them later if we want to. So that reporting has been coming out about President Trump's tax proposal that he'll make tomorrow, but maybe it's not completely accurate. Maybe there's other parts of the proposal we don't know about. So we will see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what we get tomorrow. I am pretty darn sure, though, Sean Spicer will be asked about this proposal, this tax cut proposal, and asked about these reports. What do you think about this proposal? Are you on board with this proposed tax cut? Do you like that President Trump is including this spending in the tax cut proposal reportedly, so this has a better chance of getting passed? Do you not like him including this spending in the tax cut proposal? Maybe you're someone who thinks, wait, if we're cutting taxes and we're going to add more spending on top of that, isn't that going to raise the debt? And where does the money to pay for it come from? Also, supposedly, now, people like Paul Ryan wanted to put a new tax in the tax cut. they wanted to have a new tax go along with the corporate tax cut. So people like Paul Ryan wanted this border adjustment tax on, it would be like a 20% tax on imports. And in theory, the money from that tax would balance out the money lost from the corporate tax cut. But reportedly, President Trump does not want to go for this border adjustment tax. So you might think, wait, so were they going to pass this tax cut for the corporations and also pass this new spending and not fund this in any kind of way? We'll see what the proposal is. Now, Steve Mnuchin, the director of the Treasury, said yesterday he thought that if you pass a corporate tax proposal, the tax rate's going down on corporations, but if he thinks the economy will grow enough that will be balanced out, and it'll end up paying for the amount the economy grows and the increased overall tax revenue will balance off the lower tax rate and pay for the corporate tax cut. That's what Steve Mnuchin said yesterday. So we'd love to hear what you have to think about all of these reports coming out about what President Trump is going to propose tax-wise. So give me a shout. Write me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, or email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. I should check right now. I should check and see if anybody's written in. I don't want to ignore you. Let's see. I think I'm caught up there. Let me get my email here. Okay, so something else, another thing that Sean Spicer is going to be asked about today, and this is something that I'm sure a lot of President Trump supporters have strong opinions on, is, so President Trump, let's take a step back. There is this threat of a government shutdown on, I believe, Friday night at midnight. Because, well, I guess midnight's technically Saturday morning, so as soon as it hits Saturday morning at midnight. So Friday night, you know what I'm talking about. Basically, constitutionally, Congress has to approve all spending the federal government does. And Congress has only approved spending up until the end of the week. So they have to pass another spending bill so that the government can spend money. It's an appropriations bill. And so they're working on that this week. But if they don't pass a bill by midnight on Friday, then the government has to shut down because they can't spend any money. So a potential issue with this was going to be that President Trump was saying he wanted whatever new spending bill is passed this week to include funding for the border wall. And it came out yesterday that President Trump is reportedly no longer insisting on that funding. So the Wall Street Journal reported that President Trump is no longer insisting that the spending bill for this week that's going to be passed has funding for the border wall in it. He is willing to hold off to get that funding for the border wall until later in the year. So that report came out. What do you think about this? Are you okay with President Trump saying, nope, we don't need the border wall funding now, we'll put it off till later, so he can avoid a government shutdown? Or do you think he should insist on it now? I'd like to know what you think. So write in, the information's on the screen, how to write to me. I don't know what you think about that. I've heard a couple people on Twitter. I had posted a tweet about this news story. A couple people on Twitter seemed upset about it. But, one person was like, he shouldn't do this. Another person was like, is it bad to say was like? Is that bad English? Another person was like, no, well, I feel weird about him doing this, but I trust him. So I wonder what you think about President Trump no longer insisting on funding for the border wall in the current spending bill that's supposed to be passed this week. So, if he does do that, that does make the prospect of a government shutdown less likely. We'll see what happens. We'll keep you informed. All right, so we have 25 minutes until Sean Spicer's press briefing. So we've talked about how we think Sean Spicer is going to be. Actually, we got a question here. This is from Noreen Sanderson. This is a really good question, actually. She says, what does a government shutdown mean? So I'm not an expert on this, Noreen, but I had read that if the government shuts down, it doesn't completely shut down. Like certain federal functions are still carried out. Like, for example, like federal, like police forces would still operate. They wouldn't stop operating. So, for example, I'm guessing this, I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing this is an example. the Capitol Police, the people, I believe the police at the Capitol building are federal, or parks. Well, I'm trying to think of what other, like the FBI is federal. So I would think that there are these kind of law enforcement things, and there's, and the military is federal. So what won't happen is, like, let's say there's some criminal running around that the FBI is supposed to pursue and get off the streets. If there's a government shutdown, I don't believe the FBI stops going after criminals that are active threats. And if the Capitol Police are indeed federal employees, it's not going to be like there's no more police at the Capitol building. So there are certain parts of the federal government that aren't stopped in a shutdown, but lots of other parts would be stopped in a shutdown. Now, I don't know if this would mean, like, would national parks close? Would the IRS stop processing taxes? What else? Would you not be able to get your passport updated until these are? And so my very small understanding of this is that certain essential functions like police forces and military are kept going, but other ones are not. I don't know how, would you not be able to get a welfare check? Would your unemployment insurance not come? I don't know exactly what department is what, but a lot of the federal departments would stop operating. See, that's a question, Noreen, that I need to look up during the break. So, I'll really quick though, see. I'm gonna Google this. What shuts down in a government shutdown? Let's see if there's a quick page I can find on this. Let's see. Well, the 2013 one, let's see. All right, so this is from 2013. In 2013, the government shut down. All active military duty remained on the job. Let's see. Is there anything else? What did it say about, like, the IRS? Department of Education. That's kind of confusing. All areas of the National Park and National Wildlife refuge systems would be closed. There was a shutdown in 2013, I believe. So, but all of this is saying that this is written before the 2013 shutdown, but it was saying all the national parks would be closed. Centers for Medicare services would continue large portions of their activities. So, let's see. Yeah, so basically, I won't go through all of this here, but it's like, and the FAA would continue functioning, so you wouldn't have, planes not being able to fly. So, but basically, the essential federal government services would keep going, but the non-essential ones, in some sense of non-essential, would stop functioning. Noreen, good question. Thank you. We have, this is from Jude Snyder. Jude Snyder writes, no delay, build wall. Let the Dems shut it down. Don't let them destroy you. Build the wall. We need the wall. No negotiations with evil. So Jude Snyder, she is not for President Trump saying, hey, we don't need the funding for the wall in this current spending bill. Let's put it off till later in the year. You are a no vote on that, Jude Snyder. Thank you for writing in. Okay, we have got 21 minutes until Sean Spicer's press briefing. We are covering the briefing live. We do so for every briefing here at Right Side Broadcasting. We bring it to you live. We do a pre-show. We do a post-show. Who else does that? I don't think anyone else does that I'm aware of. So we enjoy bringing you this coverage. We think it's important, and we think it's a nice alternative to the mainstream media. And if you enjoy our coverage, we hope you consider donating to us, because we rely on your donations to stay on the air. Without your donations, we could not stay on the air. We are also we're going to be bringing you from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, President Trump's rally on Saturday that he has scheduled there. Saturday night. Be there, Right Side Broadcasting. Be with us, because we will be there. I'm going, Mike is going, Liz is going, we're going to be there covering it live. We're going to be there hours before, talking to the people in line, getting the feel, showing you video from the place. showing you all the speakers beforehand, showing you President Trump's entire speech, talking to people after the speech. That's one of the most fun parts of covering a rally, where people are all psyched up, a lot of them, and then they come and talk to us after the rally and they talk about what they thought of it. So we're really excited to bring that to you on Saturday. But, it's doing those things. It's not free, and we spend as little as we can. Like, as I said yesterday, we're located in Auburn, Alabama. We are not flying to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We are driving there because we don't have a lot of money. We can't afford to fly there, so we're driving there. We're going to take a little road trip and drive to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to cover this. So, we really we do our best to cover these events for you, but we certainly it takes all we have to stay on the air covering it, and a lot of what we have is your donations. So if you'd like to donate, you can go to rsbn.tv/donate. That's rsbn.tv/donate. Or if you're watching on YouTube, very easy to donate. There's a chat room next to the video of this broadcast. You can click on the $ at the bottom of the chat room. If you click on that $, makes it easy for you to donate. And thank you to the moderators for moderating the chat today on YouTube, and the moderators at rsbn.tv. Appreciate you both moderating the chat room. So, any donation is welcome. Don't think, well, this donation is too small, they won't care. No, we will care. We value every single donation. It really helps. So thank you in advance. And thank you to everybody who's donated so far. Much appreciated. Let's see here. We have a couple more messages here. This is from Deplorable Incorporated. Deplorable Incorporated writes, the Democrats would love shutting down the government and blaming Trump. He has no choice but to wait on the wall. We'll get some funds for border stuff. So you think, Deplorable, that it's too risky for President Trump to ask for money now for the wall, because you think like it would give like the Democrats an excuse to go for a shutdown, and you think the Democrats would like a shutdown because the Republicans would get blamed. That's an interesting thought. And you also think that President Trump can get the funds later for the border wall. So, it sounds like you're for the wall and you're for getting funds for this, but at the same time you think the prudent thing for President Trump to do is to hold off for now and don't insist on it this week. Thank you, Deplorable Incorporated, for writing in. And No to the Mark writes in, Rush Limbaugh just said, ram it down their throats in all orifices. Shut it down. Build the wall. So according to No to the Mark, I haven't listened to this Rush broadcast, but Rush Limbaugh said he thinks President Trump should insist on it. So this is one of these issues. There seems to be a bunch of division, even within people who support President Trump. Even within them, there's a bunch of strong division about whether President Trump should, as he's now reportedly going to do, not insist on money for the wall in the new spending bill to be passed this week, or whether he should insist on it. Thank you for writing in. Well, I would love to hear from other of you. So if you want to write in, @Lookner on Twitter, that's where you can find me. Direct message me there or email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. We have about 17 minutes. 17 minutes until Sean Spicer's press briefing. I got a couple emails here. Thank you. Mike Klonks writes in about General Flynn. I was just going to talk about that. Greetings, Steve. I am upset for General Flynn. House Intel Committee says he's guilty of crimes for not reporting income from Russia and Turkey. Something is wrong. Flynn is an honorable patriot. So this is another thing. Thank you for writing in, Mike. This is another thing that's going to be talked about today. It's going to be, Sean Spicer is going to be asked about this. So the story today is that Jason Chaffetz, who's the Republican head of the House Oversight Committee, came out and he said, from documents he's seen about General Flynn's declarations when he was applying to get his security clearance, when he was going to be in the National Security Advisor, he was applying for a certain security clearance. He did not, according to Jason Chaffetz, disclose that he had in the past received money for Russia for attending a certain event there, and I believe speaking in Russia, and also he hadn't reported money he'd gotten, it was either 2015 or 2016 for lobbying for Turkey. And Jason Chaffetz said that may be a violation of the law because I guess the law says you have to declare this kind of income from foreign governments when you apply for security clearance. So there's this question as to whether General Flynn violated the law. And So I guess that'll all play out in the legal system. But a part of this story that the media is like freaking out over today is there was a request to the White House for some documents from the House Oversight Committee. And today, the White House declined that request. And I saw this reported like, White House declines request for General Flynn documents. And it makes it sound, if you just read the headline, like the White House is stonewalling or something. But, you know, the White House actually came out with a letter today. And if you're interested in the story, I would encourage you to look at the letter. It's about a page and a half. And the letter just goes through the specific requests for documents that the House Oversight Committee made. And the letter explains why each part of that request they didn't feel that they should they weren't going to comply with each part of the request. But let me just quickly give you a little summary here. I won't read the whole thing. Let's see here. So, for example, the White House says, requests 1 and 2 seek this sort of information, but that's information you got to get from the Defense Department because it has to do with them. So they say, go to the Defense Department for that part of the request. Request 3 seeks some documents. What does it say? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, request 3 seeks documents about stuff General Flynn did before January 20th, which is before the Trump administration was in office. So we don't have those documents. That's out of control. Those documents you won't find with us. Then it says, and then request 4 through 6, it says, seek certain documents, and let's see. Or actually, there's another part where it says some of the requests. One, you asked us to give you some documents, but those contain they might contain confidential information, and also they wouldn't seem to have anything to do with the investigation. We're not sure why you're asking for those. And then for other requests, it said you asked about for documents relating to certain activities he did, but about his efforts to seek permission or approval for these payments from foreign governments, from foreign sources. But that kind of activity would have been in 2015 and 2016, and we weren't in office then, so our White House can't give you that stuff. So now maybe there are responses that the House Oversight Committee would give to these points, but it's not like the White House just said, no, we're not giving you the General Flynn documents. No. They sent out a letter that explained for each of the requests why they weren't going to give the documents. The letter makes sense. Now, maybe there's problems with the letter that I don't know about. There could be. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying, so don't think when you see the headlines on TV like, oh, the White House is just saying no and stonewalling. No, the White House sent out a letter explaining why they're not going to give these documents up, and so if somebody's going to complain about this, they should address the White House's reasons and explain why the White House's reasons are not legitimate for not giving over these documents. So, but I'm sure that Sean Spicer will be asked about that in the press briefing. So thank you for writing in, Mike, and asking me about that story and reminding me. Okay, Andrew Sova writes in, why is everyone tripping about a border wall now? The wall obviously wouldn't start construction within the first 100 days, so what's the big deal? So I guess you're saying, why are people concerned about, Andrew, why is it such a big deal whether President Trump gets the funding for the wall now or gets it like later in the year? Well, I think people who wanted the wall, let me try to offer an answer. So I think there are some people who really they really liked President Trump's proposal to build a wall, and they think the wall is needed to keep illegal immigrants out of the country, and the sooner it goes up, the sooner it can do its job of keeping illegal immigrants out of the country. So I think some people might want the wall built sooner rather than later. Also, maybe they think some people might think, look, asking for it now is a good way to get this funding because there's a cost. If President Trump asks for this funding now in the spending bill this week, and the Democrats won't give it to him, then there might be a government shutdown. And maybe the Democrats would not want there to be a government shutdown, and that would make them more likely to give him the money for the wall than they would give him later. So there's different arguments people might give as to why it does matter to them to it would matter that President Trump would try to get the money for the border wall now rather than later. Now, I'm not saying you have to agree with them, Andrew, but these are some arguments they might give. Thanks, Andrew, for writing in. There was another message here that I hadn't read yet. 10 minutes until the Sean Spicer press briefing, by the way. We'll carry it here live. Looking forward to it. Greg writes in. Greg Jackson writes in, all I get lately is a spinning circle. I've had to view it on the White House YouTube. Well, Greg, I'm not aware of any problems we had with the briefing yesterday. Jake, producer Jake, are you aware of any problems we had with the briefing yesterday? Jake is not either. So, sometimes there are little things that affect small numbers of users, or it could have to do with your computer, or that, we've had sometimes in the past where some people can't get the programming and some people can, but yesterday I know it was clear. So I would say it might be on your end, Greg, because the last couple days things should have been fine here. We had some issues this morning unfortunately, with President Trump's speech at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. We have been spending the last hour or so diagnosing that. We think we have it fixed, so our apologies about that. We think it was a server-related issue. We have here, the Mid-American writes, we voted for a wall. If he doesn't force this through, he will lose his party seats in 2018 and risk re-election in 2020. So Mid-American, I do think you make a good point here that's worth paying attention to, which is there are a number of people who voted for President Trump really supported this wall proposal, and that was a big proposal. And I do think for President Trump, I understand the risk of asking for the money for the wall this week because that does risk a government shutdown. However, I do think with President Trump, there's also a risk if he seems like he's abandoning the wall and he seems like he doesn't care about it that much and he's just like, oh, we'll just wait till later. That in itself perhaps risks alienating some of his supporters who might say, wait a second, this is not the person I voted for, like you're saying, Mid-American. So it's a delicate situation. It's a delicate situation here, and it requires some subtle handling from President Trump. How can he get enough Democrat support to get some of his legislation passed, while at the same time staying true to his own supporters and his own base and not abandoning things that they wanted to see? So this will be very interesting to see how it plays out. But I do know when I read this story last night that President Trump was going to maybe not ask for the border wall money this week like he said he was going to, my first thought when I read that was like, whoa, that's going to get a lot of his base mad, isn't it? Quite mad? Now, maybe I'm wrong. And we've heard both. We've heard some people who are upset. And we've heard some people say, well, I'm not happy about this, but I trust President Trump. So, don't know. But thank you, Mid-American, for writing in and sharing your view. Let's see here. We have 7 minutes until the press briefing. There are some other things I think Sean Spicer is going to be asked about, so I want to talk about those. I will say, though, when I see the stuff about General Flynn today, it's just like the General Flynn story right now is, to me, is just one of these stories where it's like it gives media an excuse to talk about some story that they think makes Trump look bad. So they talk about it way more than is warranted. So let's say General Flynn did break the law and didn't disclose his payments from Russia and Turkey like he was supposed to. So fine, maybe he'll get prosecuted. President Trump already let him go. So, to freak out over this General Flynn story, like the news has been freaking out today, definitely MSNBC and CNN have, this, he may have committed a crime. It's yep, but he's not even in the administration anymore. So fine, you can say something about it, but to do it minute after minute of breaking news coverage on this, it's just, again, to me, it's them looking for ways to report stories that are negative about him. And I will say this, I had CNN on this morning while I was doing a bunch of work, and I kept looking at it. And I got to say, this morning, CNN felt to me like the liberal version of Fox News. Like it was one report, one anti-Trump report after another. I tweeted about a report about the State Department posting that story about the Mar-a-Lago, which got taken down. But that was supposedly a report by a reporter of theirs. But basically, she was talking as if it was an editorial. I mean, it sounded like an editorial, an anti-Trump editorial. And she was just making these editorializing statements rather than statements of fact a lot of the time, but it wasn't presented as such. And then they freaked out over this Ivanka Trump story about which wasn't nearly as big a story as they were making it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that this thing has happened at CNN like happened at the New York Times, which is just from the top, it's coming down. Our readers and viewers like anti-Trump stuff, so let's have lots of it. I mean, it clearly happens at the Washington Post, and I just think it's coming from the top because it's too coincidental that it's like you see such to me, like slanted programming, but I'm not, CNN can be slanted, but this morning to me, I really noticed it because it was like one thing after the other and just bad. Okay, we have another message here from Christine. Let's see. Oh, this is from Christine Bestien. Hi, Christine. Christine says, I would have preferred to call in. Oh, well, we weren't taking calls in the morning. We're going to take calls, I think, in the post show. So, Christine, maybe you can call in then. She says, the only effect I witnessed as the result of the 2013 shutdown, they did it Memorial Day weekend, the kickoff of the tourist season, they shut down the national parks. But the damage was not to the government. All the mom and pop stores, tourist attractions, tours, hotels, gas stations, etc. were all denied income on the opening weekend of the tourist season. Main Street USA was shut down, not the government. So Christine makes a good point, which is that if there is a government shutdown, it can have these, residual effects. And Christine makes the point about, if you close these national parks, for example, there's lots of ordinary Americans who don't work at the park but have related businesses and they're affected. And also, people who might have planned a trip. Maybe a family spent money on plane tickets to go visit National Park X or National Monument Y, and then they can't go see things. Would some of the stuff in DC be closed? I don't know, but it certainly affects people negatively. So I think we can all hope that the government doesn't shut down. Okay, so about 2-3 minutes until the scheduled start time of the Spicer Briefing. Jake, who's producing today, thank you, Jake, will shout in my ear when the briefing is coming on, and we'll cover it for you. We have from Gab.ai Marion Talley. She writes in, outstanding idea, also might shorten the line at the wire transfer kiosk places across the country. Now, hold on a second. This is responding to what MidAmerican said. So MidAmerican said, wall funding, tax all wire transfers from U.S. to Mexico, Central, South America, 10%. Then they really do pay for it. Interesting proposal from MidAmerican. And then Gab.ai Marion Talley said, outstanding idea, also might shorten the line at the wire transfer kiosk places across the country. And then she has like a wink emoji and a smile emoji. So thank you, MidAmerican, for your proposal. That does raise the issue, President Trump has said Mexico is going to pay for the wall. At the same time, he said it might be delayed. That whether our government might have to allocate some money first, and then they'll pay. But there is this debate on how they'll pay. And I heard some speculation yesterday. Somebody on Morning Joe was talking yesterday about maybe they'd work out some deal where what would they say? I can't remember what they said. But it was this kind of thing where they'd pay for the wall, but not explicitly pay for the wall or something like that. Or, there's maybe some, because I don't think from what I've heard, Mexican politicians can't be seen to just hand over a check for the wall, but there might be some kind of thing they can work out. So the general point here is, maybe there's a way this wall gets paid for by Mexico in some way other than them literally handing a check in a big ceremony to America. And that seems to be something you're talking about as well, MidAmerican. Thanks for writing in. We have Old Guy 1947 writes in, make them vote on the wall to see who is for and against it. So you want a vote on the wall itself, or maybe Old Guy 1947, you just want funding for the wall to be included in the spending bill so that they have to vote on it and so we can see who is for it and against it. Thanks, Old Guy 1947, for writing in. It's about, it's 1:59. Scheduled start time is 2 o'clock for the press briefing. And we've talked about a number of things here that Sean Spicer will be asked about. Excellent comments so far, by the way. Appreciate your feedback. A lot of you had different views on this whole wall issue, so good to hear from you about that. Feel free to write me if you want to get a last comment in before the Spicer briefing. Direct message me on Twitter @Lookner, or email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Also, we will be here for the post show. Stick around after the briefing. We'll come back. We'll read more of your comments. We'll take some calls if you want to call in. And if something happens during the briefing and you want to comment on it, shoot me a message during the briefing and I will read your comment after the briefing on the air. You don't have to wait till after. And let's see here. So I want to get to a couple other things that Sean Spicer might be asked about, by the way. We have that. We have the... there was this thing that happened last night. I saw, this was reported, that Turkey launched these airstrikes on these Syrian Kurdish troops, which have been fighting ISIS, helping us fight ISIS, and that the Pentagon actually supports, and they killed a number of these troops because they're Kurdish and Turkey doesn't like the Kurds. So there's supposedly a lot of anger in the Pentagon about this, and I'm guessing that's something Sean Spicer could be asked about as well today. We'll see. North Korea. So North Korea had like a big anniversary today. I think it was the 85th anniversary of the start of their armed forces or something like that. But they did a giant artillery test, but they didn't do a nuclear weapons test or a missile test, and some people thought they would do some sort of test like that today. So maybe Sean Spicer's asked about that, and maybe Sean Spicer says something like that shows that President Trump's strong approach is working, and also it shows that President Trump's communication with China has worked because China's putting pressure on them. So you might see some question and answer like that. We'll see, though. North Korea could test a weapon at any time or a missile at any time. We are at, by the way, 2:01 p.m. Anytime now. Sean Spicer. We will go to Sean Spicer live for the press briefing. So, another thing Sean Spicer might be asked about is Rick Perry, Secretary of Energy, this morning said that he's going to recommend President Trump renegotiate the Paris Climate Change Treaty, not pull out of it, but renegotiate it. I'm not sure what renegotiation Rick Perry is going to propose. So you could take that two ways. You could say, it shows that Rick Perry, you could take this as a sign that President Trump isn't going to be supportive of the Paris Climate Treaty because he's going to maybe want to renegotiate, and that's what Rick Perry's going to recommend. Or you could see it as like, President Trump is maybe going to be on board with the Paris Climate Treaty because Rick Perry could have said he was going to recommend that President Trump pull out of the treaty. So that this treaty is the big treaty in 2015 where a lot of countries, I think 180-something countries, got together and said we're going to all work toward reducing greenhouse gases and keeping the temperature in the world from the Earth from going up too much. And there's this question about whether President Trump will want to pull out of the treaty or not. But, if you look at one thing people who don't want to pull out of the treaty could take as a positive from Rick Perry's remark is that he didn't say he's going to recommend that we pull out of the treaty. So that's another thing Sean Spicer definitely could be asked about today. All right, so we're now time check, 2:03. Sometimes the briefings start a little late, and we will keep going here until the briefing starts. What else? What else might Sean Spicer be asked about today? Let's see. Well, something we haven't talked about on this episode today on this show was the 100 days stuff. So, Saturday is President Trump's first 100 days, and the media loves to talk about the first 100 days, and a lot of them have their little 100 days logo on their constant bug that's constantly on their screen now, the TV news networks. So that's something Sean Spicer will be asked about. And I'm guessing the media will ask about something like this. President Trump, has he done enough during his 100 days? Is he's upset he didn't do more? And Sean Spicer will say something like, no, he did do a lot. Look at all the executive orders, and he's proposing these things. So if those of you out there who get them frustrated when you hear the media ask repeated questions and ask things they've asked before, I think you might be frustrated when they ask about the 100 days questions, which I know they're going to ask. Let's see here. And I'm just seeing, we just talked about that Turkey story. This conflict news just reported State Department said the U.S. is deeply concerned about Turkey conducting airstrikes in Syria without coalition approval. Now, another piece of this that is possibly that makes this a difficult situation and makes this of concern to the U.S. is that the U.S. has a number of troops in Turkey. I think it has 1,000 something, either 1,000 or more than 1,000 troops, a few hundred more than 1,000 troops in Turkey right now. In Syria right now, helping to fight ISIS. So, and if these strikes didn't have coalition approval, you have Turkey conducting strikes in Syria on a force that the Pentagon is supporting. So for all you know, there could be U.S. troops embedded among them. Now, there weren't any U.S. troops, from what I heard, among the Kurdish troops that Turkey bombed, but it is a concern from the State Department and the Pentagon, I would assume. Oh, I didn't know this. Andrew, we're going to the briefing. Enjoy it. We'll see you afterwards.
You aware of that?
Yeah. 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start off today by having the Secretary of Commerce discuss some action that the Commerce Department took last night with respect to Canadian softwood lumber and some action that talks about what we're doing to make sure that we're fighting for our industries here at home. So without further ado, I want to bring up Secretary Wilbur Ross.
Thank you, Sean. The action we took last night is actually the culmination of a couple of decades of disputes between the United States and Canada. What's provoked the disputes is the following. In Canada, the forests are owned by the individual provinces, and each of the provinces sets a charge for the loggers to use when they're taking trees down. In the U.S., it's all open market, it's all market-based prices. So the provinces subsidize the cutting down of lumber, this technical term being stumpage, and then that lets them charge a subsidized low price when the product hits the U.S. border. We have determined preliminarily that those problems, while they vary from one province to another, in some cases are as high as roughly 25%, and on average are around 20%. So they're quite material items. So what we did, the preliminary decision that was put out yesterday imposes those countervailing duties on softwood lumber from Canada. Those duties will be collected starting today, and they will be collected on a retroactive basis going back 90 days, because it was 90 days ago that the Canadians were put on notice about this being an inappropriate process. What it amounts to is the following. There is roughly $15 billion worth of softwood lumber used in houses in this country, and about 31.5% of that comes from the Canadians. So that's roughly $5 billion a year. 20% tariff on that is essentially $1 billion a year. And the retrospective 90-day feature adds another $250 million to that on a one-time basis. Softwood lumber, as I say, is fundamentally used in single-family houses. We do not think that the price of lumber will go up by anything like the 20%, but there may be some small increase in the price of lumber for the house.
So will housing prices be increased in the United States due to that action?
Not necessarily, because you're talking such a small amount, and the biggest part of most home prices in any event is the land value, not the lumber value. Lumber is a pretty small percentage of the total cost of a house.
Mr. Secretary, what provoked this? As you mentioned, this has been a long-running dispute, subject of conversations between the U.S. and Canadian government, the Bush administration and the Obama administration. Is this part of the milk dispute, and is this a lever or a bargaining chip with the Canadian government over that dispute that's going on as well?
This investigation had been underway before anything came up about milk. And on a statutory basis, the last day we could have released the findings would have been today. So the only thing that we did do was accelerate it one day.
But it's not related at all to the milk dispute. Do you see it as factoring in the Canadian judgments about how to respond or how to resolve some of these other trade disputes?
Well, everything relates to everything else when you're trying to negotiate, so I can't say there's no impact. But what we had tried to do was to clear the air and get this dispute out of the way before the big NAFTA talks went on. That was not possible to achieve, and that's why we went ahead and released the findings.
The Canadian government is an extremely close ally and neighbor. Are you comfortable with how this has worked out in terms of what it means for the overall relationship between our two countries?
Well, they are a close ally, they're an important ally, they're generally a good neighbor. That doesn't mean they don't have to play by the rules.
What do you mean by generally a good neighbor?
Well, things like this I don't regard as being a good neighbor, dumping lumber. And there's a feeling in the dairy industry that they were a little bit abrupt in the action that they took the week before.
Secretary Ross, the Canadian government says that those are unfair tariffs, and each time the case was brought to an international court, Canada won its case. What do you answer to this?
I had nothing to do with the prior cases. I'm confident that this case is a good case.
You want to put tariffs on dairy too?
The problem with dairy isn't that they're dumping dairy products in the U.S. The problem is the reverse. They're prohibiting U.S. dairy producers from selling their products in Canada, and as a practical matter, and we're looking into whether there are measures we can do to try to correct that.
Mr. Secretary, have you heard from anybody in the Canadian government, or has the Prime Minister reached out to President Trump to try to convince you to change your policy or change the approach or work with you in any way?
Well, I haven't heard of anybody trying to ask us to change the approach. You've seen the public statements that the Canadians put out. As far as I know, that is their position.
Mr. Secretary, I'm curious whether this softwood lumber dispute or the milk dispute points to the need to revisit, to renegotiate NAFTA sooner rather than later.
Well, I think it does, because think about it, if NAFTA were functioning properly, you wouldn't be having these kinds of very prickly, very unfortunate developments back to back. So So in that sense, it shows that NAFTA has not worked as well as it should.
But milk's not covered by it. But milk's not covered by it. This particular
That-
milk dispute is not covered by that.
That's one of the problems.
In other words.
Why not try to resolve this in a not-so-public fashion? You're coming out into the briefing room, you're obviously trying to flex the muscles of this administration. What would you say to the layman out there who says, you know, why is President Trump messing with the Canadians now?
It's not a question of President Trump messing with the Canadians. We believe the Canadians violated legitimate practice, and to the degree we're correct in that, it should be corrected, just like steel dumping from China or any other trade infraction.
You're trying to make a point, publicly.
We make it publicly all the time. It's just that there has been so much general public interest engendered by the two things, the dairy and the lumber, that we felt it was good to clarify.
During the presidential campaign, people following then candidate Trump would have assumed his singular focus would be on Mexico in terms of trade. All of a sudden now we're hearing all these items related to Canada. Can you tell us why the focus seems to have shifted up north?
Well, we had no way to know that the Canadian dairy people would take the action that they did, nor did we have any way to know that the lumber dispute wouldn't have been resolved by negotiation. We tried, it didn't work, and so we went ahead with the statutory proceeding.
Is the administration contemplating additional trade action against Canada?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, is the administration contemplating additional trade actions against Canada at this point?
As far as I know, there's nothing immediate contemplated.
Secretary Ross, when I talk to trade experts about this, they say the substance of what you did is very routine. Like, this has been done before, these preliminary countervailing duties, but they said what was really irregular was the way that you communicated it. Is this something that you're trying to sort of do as a bit of a PR thing to put NAFTA on notice? How should we read your very aggressive statement?
Well, it's
the
not
substance?
routine. It's not routine in that $1 billion of countervailing duties does not happen every single day. This is a quite large.
In the early 2000s,
Pardon me?
it's happened before. It's not unprecedented.
Well, we made the release the way that we made the release.
Why did you make it that way?
It seemed appropriate under the circumstances. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, thank you, sir. Sir, India and America both were, America was the largest trading partner of India, or India was the largest trading partner under Prime Minister Modi. And now we have a new administration with a new thinking and a business administration. Same thing in India, Prime Minister Modi has the same thinking. So what is the future of the trade between US and India, sir?
Well, U.S. does not have a free trade agreement with India at this point, so the trade relations between U.S. and India are governed by the WTO rules. There's nothing in the actions we've taken that changes that.
Mr. Secretary, following up on what Jim said, though, if housing prices do increase due to this, what do you tell the average consumer in the United States if their prices are going up? They didn't bargain for that.
Well, I don't know what they bargained for, but I'm sure what nobody in the United States bargained for was people dumping product. It's no different whether you dump steel or aluminum or cars or lumber or anything else. Nobody has.
Use the term countervailing duty and anti-dumping interchangeably. They're two different things. Which is it, dumping or
This is
countervailing
countervailing duties.
Mr. Secretary, do you have a specific timeline for when the president is going to announce his intention to renegotiate NAFTA? And could this move actually complicate his efforts to get a good deal?
Well, we put the Congress on notice quite a few weeks ago of our intention to renegotiate NAFTA. What's been stalled is getting the Trade Promotion Authority, the so-called Fast Track Authority, approved by the Congress. Now, with Bob Lighthizer having been confirmed out of the committee today and hopefully coming to the Senate for a full vote very shortly, that should cure one of the objections that some of the senators had. Namely, they were concerned about formally reopening NAFTA in the absence of the U.S. trade rep being confirmed. Now, the catch-22 to that was they were also slow-walking the confirmation, so it was a little bit of a circular thing. But in any event, that appears to be in the process of being corrected.
But could this move complicate your efforts to get a good deal?
Everything affects everything else, but this trade issue over lumber, as has been pointed out, is not a brand-new issue. It's been around for quite a while.
Mr. Secretary, the meeting, the next upcoming meeting of the G7 is about a month away, and the U.S. is in the middle of negotiations with, or talks with China about how to address North Korea. Are you comfortable that the North Korea calculus has not hamstrung your ability to be as direct with China on matters like this? And is the action with Canada meant also to signal to our other Western economic allies and partners that if they mess with the U.S., they could face something like this?
Well, as to Canada, as you know, at the Mar-a-Lago meetings, we agreed on a kind of 100-day program, and we're going back and forth with the Chinese over that 100-day program. So we shall see what comes from that. As to the action with lumber, or for that matter with dairy with Canada, it really has no bearing on the Chinese relationship at all.
Thank you. It seems to me that the object of the 25% tariff on soft lumber coming out of Canada is not to raise wood prices, it's to save and create American forestry jobs and loggers who are losing their jobs right now as a result of the dumping. Has the administration done a study? Do you know how many American jobs are going to be saved by this tariff?
Well, it's quite a lot of board feet of lumber. Lumber sells for about 38 cents per foot. So if you take all these large amounts, there are about 47 billion board feet of lumber consumed in the U.S. market in a given year. And part of the reason I don't see that there'll be a huge price differential coming in is this only affects 31.5% of that output. The competition among the American producers remains the same. So this is not like suddenly house prices are going to go up 10 or 15%. That's silly.
But how many jobs will be created? How many jobs will be created?
Pardon me?
How many new jobs will be created or jobs will be saved as a result of stopping the dumping?
Well,
That's the nature of my
I don't
question.
have an exact total, but I can tell you it's in quite a few states along the northern perimeter, going all the way down into Louisiana. So this affects quite a number of people and quite a number of businesses.
Mr. Secretary, you're getting bipartisan support at the very least for your actions on softwood lumber. I expect that there'll be bipartisan support on whatever action you take on behalf of the dairy industry as well. I mean, you appear to be laying the groundwork here for your notification to Congress that you'd like to renegotiate NAFTA. Are we correct in reading it that way, that you're kind of paving the pathway here, or at least greasing the skids?
Well, the president announced a couple of months ago that he wanted to renegotiate NAFTA, and as I say, it's been stalled in the Congress because to do it effectively, you really need to use the Trade Promotion Authority. I think you're aware of the benefit that gives, which is when it comes to the floor for vote, it's an up or down vote. They can't amend the deal. So it makes it much more probable of getting a deal approved. That's the practical significance of
So
it.
these very public actions that you're taking and being here in the briefing, is that sort of paving the way for promoting that authority?
Well, we hope to get as soon as possible the Trade Promotion Authority granted. Only Congress can do that. And so we've been consulting with the staff. I've met I don't know how many times, but quite a lot of times, both with Ways and Means and with the Senate Finance Committee. And we hope that with the Lighthizer confirmation, that will remove that impediment.
Mr. Secretary, do you favor a free trade agreement with India for
I'm sorry, I couldn't
Do you
hear.
favor a free trade agreement with India? As you said earlier, it doesn't exist between the two countries right now. Do you favor a free trade agreement with India?
Oh, any pending trade events with India? Is that the question?
Free trade.
I don't believe that there have been any serious discussions with India of late on the topic of a free trade agreement. But there's no inherent negative attitude on our part relating that.
And on Thursday, you're going to have an announcement on Thursday that you'll do something similar with aluminum that you did with steel last week in terms of initiating investigations into potential aluminum dumping into the country. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think the right time to talk about executive orders is once they've been issued.
Mr. Secretary, this is a high-profile action, even if there's a precedent for similar action in the past. Is there a risk that this could provoke retaliation on the part of the Canadians, and we could see a trade war between the United States and Canada?
Well, I know that would be a stimulatory thing for all your readership, but we don't think that's going to happen.
So this is isolated. This is dairy and softwood and.
We think so, and we certainly hope so, and we look forward to constructive discussions with the Canadians as we get into NAFTA.
You don't anticipate any retaliatory action on the part of Canada?
It's totally Canada's decision what they'll do. I'm not aware of anything that we've violated, so I don't know what it is that they could do that would be a legitimate action.
What if we pass the border adjustment tax? What if that were part of the tax reform package?
Well, as I understand it, there'll be some word on the tax reform package from the people who are working on it, so it would be better to address that question to them.
While we have you, Mr. Secretary, what about this notion of 3% GDP growth? Is that a fair assessment? Is that something that is realistic? Do you believe it's realistic?
Well, I would hope that the growth could, over time, get to be better than that. President Obama is the only president in many that didn't have at least 1 year of 3% growth. And with all the initiatives that we're doing, the regulatory reform, the trade reform, the tax reform, hopefully, and unleashing energy, there's no reason we shouldn't be able at least to hit that, if not beat it.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned cars. Who is dumping cars to the United States? Which
No, I just use that as a figure of speech.
Secretary, who is dumping cars to the United States? Which country?
I said it was a figure of speech.
Mr. Secretary, what happened between the press conference with Prime Minister Trudeau and the President said he would only be tweaking the relationship and this decision on softwood lumber? What changed?
Well, first of all, this was not a presidential decision to do the softwood lumber. This was a decision that arose from a trade case that was underway. So it was a normal decision. So I don't think it has anything to do with the personal relationship between Mr. Trudeau and the president.
Mr. Secretary, finally, if you or the president have any faith and trust in WTO?
Well, WTO is a whole different subject matter. We do have some questions and some concerns about it. There will be a WTO meeting coming up in the next several weeks, and what will come out of that will come out of that.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. In your view, should the U.S. stay in the Paris Climate Agreement or withdraw from it?
Well, now you're really getting outside my area.
You're a participant in those discussions.
It's really outside my area. I'm having enough difficulty dealing with the trade issues rather than poaching on other people's territory. Yes, ma'am.
Are you concerned about the renegotiations of FTA with South Korea?
Well, the 5th anniversary of the South Korean arrangement, the so-called KORUS, comes up, I believe, on May 4th or May 5th, something like that. So that would be a logical time to think through whether there was something to be done or not.
Do you think softwood lumber might get Michael Flynn's name off the front pages?
Is Michael Flynn now a trade issue? I wasn't aware that he
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Secretary, here's one more way out of the box for you.
Well, thank you for
if in
that.
fact the next president is elected as Marine Le Pen in France, who is not at all for the continuing in the EU, how would that affect the relationship with France and the EU?
That's such a hypothetical question that I find it very difficult to answer. Well, I think let's wait for the French runoff election. Let's see who's elected. Let's see what actions they take, and then we'll be in a position to make a reasoned response to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
You're always welcome. Come anytime.
That doesn't make me feel too good. They said come back anytime.
You're always welcome.
He is always welcome.
I'm glad you're out of questions because I'm out of answers.
Now the Secretary has exhausted you all. So up on the screens, I know we had a little bit of discussion about this yesterday. This is the landing page for the content of the website that we launched late last night on the President's busy first 100 days. I know that many of you have noted the robust pace that the President has kept during these first 100 days. So it's just a glimpse of some of the action that he's taken and some of the key priorities that he made to the American people. Despite the historic obstruction by Senate Democrats, he's worked with Congress to pass more legislation in his first 100 days than any president since Truman. And these bills deliver on some of his most significant promises to the American people. He signed an historic 13 congressional review acts to clear unnecessary regulations and keep government out of the way of the American people. He's extended the Veterans Choice Program, giving our nation's heroes the peace of mind they deserve, while this administration continues to work with Congress to enact comprehensive reform and modernization at the VA. He's refocused NASA's mission to dream big for American space exploration again and promoted programs dedicated to encouraging women to pursue careers in STEM fields. All told, he has signed 28 pieces of legislation. And it's not just through legislation that the President has made serious progress on his top priorities. The President promised to enforce our nation's borders. His Attorney General, Homeland Security, and their staffs have been working around the clock to fulfill that promise. He has directed a halt of federal funding to jurisdictions that do not comply with federal immigration laws. He has ordered the hiring of 10,000 immigration and customs enforcement officers and agents and 5,000 Custom and Border Patrol agents. And it's working. Illegal alien border crossings have plummeted more than 61% since January of this year. The world is responding to the leadership that the President is bringing to Washington. In all, during his first 100 days, the President has made 68 calls with 38 different world leaders and hosted a total of 16 bilateral meetings. The President has rebuilt America's standing in the world, and these meetings and calls have led to real action. NATO's Secretary General was here a few weeks ago, and he directly credited the President for his tough talk that was fair but tough as a candidate and now as a president for helping to put pressure on the counties and on the countries that are not contributing their fair share to the alliance. Just last week, Aya Higazi finally came home after the President personally addressed her situation with President al-Sisi. And China continues to take positive steps both at the UN and in other arenas to help us combat the threat posed by North Korea. The President has also turned his words into action here at home. For too many years, the hardworking men and women of this country were poorly served and with a government that wasn't working for them but itself in special interests. As the President said during his inaugural speech, those forgotten men and women are not going to be forgotten by a Trump administration. From the moment he took office, the President has been taking action and putting America back to work by putting the people back into the government, unleashing the American economy by slashing overly burdensome and unnecessary federal regulations, welcoming union representatives, top business leaders, and small business owners into the White House to personally hear directly from them about the policies that prevent them from creating and maintaining well-paying jobs. He's reinvigorating our domestic energy sector, reviving private infrastructure investment that helps us become more energy independent. And today, he's signing an executive order setting up a task force that will produce a 180-day review of the regulations, policy, and legislation that unnecessarily hinders economic growth in the agriculture sector. That task force will be led by our newly sworn-in Secretary of Agriculture, former Governor Sonny Perdue. Secretary Perdue, who was sworn in earlier this morning, along with many other cabinet members, will be traveling outside Washington this entire week to share these tremendous achievements with the American people. Small Business Administrator Linda McMahon is in Orlando for multiple events, including a roundtable with Hispanic small business owners. Tomorrow, Secretary Carson will be in Columbus, Ohio, for the fourth stop of his listening tour, where he'll speak to the Ohio Housing Council and meet with local leaders and residents of public housing developments. And Secretary Perdue is getting right to work, traveling to Kansas City, Missouri, Thursday and Friday to visit agricultural facilities and meet with Governor Greitens. The President and his extraordinary qualified cabinet have made incredible progress in just these first 100 days. But this is just the beginning. We look forward to even more prosperity as consumer and CEO confidence continues to rise in the wake of these pro-growth policies. An even safer world from destroying ISIS and other forms of radical Islamic terrorism that threaten our entire globe to keeping our smallest communities safe for American families. And a government that serves the people, not the special interests or personal political alliances. Finally, before I take your questions, I just want to proudly announce that on May 4th, the President will speak aboard the USS Intrepid in New York City to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Coral Sea, a major naval battle during World War II in which the United States joined with Australia to halt the advance of enemy forces. That same day at the museum, the President will hold a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull of Australia. The President looks forward to meeting the Prime Minister and to showcasing the enduring bonds, deep friendship, and close alliance the United States has with Australia. And with that, let's go. John Roberts.
Sean, does the White House believe that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn broke any laws in filling out his standard Form 86 disclosure? And furthermore, why is the White House apparently stonewalling the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform on its request for some of the documents that should be in the White House's possession on Mr. Flynn?
I will correct you on that. The committee sent a form letter to several agencies, including the White House, asking to find those documents. The documents in question, the Department of Defense possessed and sent over to him. The documents that occurred before he worked here would be up to him to turn over. So my understanding is the committee has the documents that they were looking for.
In the letter that Mark Short, and I know that SF-86 was referred to the DIA. And
it wasn't just referred to him, that's where it's held.
Well, I know, but they were referred to the DIA for the SF-86, and apparently they have gained access to that document. But there are other documents that should be in the White House's possession that Mark Short in the letter to the committee said the White House can't provide because of sensitive nature. Also said that there were no documents that were available prior to the 20th.
Right.
But I also asked the question, does the White House believe that Lieutenant General Flynn might have broken the law when he filled out SF-86?
I don't. That would be a question for him and a law enforcement agency, whether or not he filled. I don't know what he filled out and what he did or did not do. That all happened. He filled that form out prior to coming here, and so it would be up to the committee and other authorities to look at that. I don't know. But with respect to the letter, they asked for three things. The SF-86, which you properly point out was in the possession of the DIA. My understanding through reports is that they have obtained that. Then they asked for documents prior to January 20th. As you know, through the Constitution, we didn't assume the White House until January 20th at noon, so we don't have the documents prior to assuming the White House. And then the third would be they listed for every call and contact that he made, which is an extraordinary number. That's a very that's a very unwieldy request.
So was it the sheer volume of it, or was
well, I mean, it's to say we want the National Security Advisor, whose job it is to talk with foreign counterparts on a daily basis to document every call that he may or may not have made, is not exactly a request that's able to be filled. But every document that they asked for, my understanding is that they've gotten.
So is it your position that during the transition, the Trump transition has no custodial possession of any of these documents?
Well, I would, again,
that Flynn filled out as part of the process to become the president's national security advisor. I mean, you seem to be suggesting there's an arm's length relationship.
No,
it's your
because
transition.
right. Thanks. There's two issues. He had an SF-86, which is a security clearance form that was filled out during the Obama administration. He had a investigation in 2016 that was done under the last administration. And again, those are not documents that the White House would ever possess on any employee. They would come from the requesting authority.
Okay, so
and so in that case, again, remember they sent out a form letter to I think 5 or 6 agencies requesting the same documents. The place where the documents that they had questioned did fulfill that request.
Right. And I'm just trying to find out from your perspective, is there no obligation, either the transition or the White House, to do anything more than you have done or has been done in this matter?
Everything that the White House has been asked to do, we have made that the only documents that were made available to them that they asked for were the ones that the Department of Defense had.
And how about these calls made when he was working during the transition on behalf of a future President Trump? Aren't those things that you should have some either responsibility or obligation to provide if you can?
Well, I think again, it's a question is if you can. When you ask for every call, no, but I think that's a pretty. There is, I mean, that to ask for every call or contact that a national security advisor made is pretty outlandish, if you will. To say that we want to have a list of everything that there is no.
But theoretically,
but again,
those
question,
calls were made on behalf of the Trump transition, were they not?
When?
When he was in the, I mean, this.
Look,
this
Major,
period of time-
he did not.
this
We
period of
started
time
this
that the
administration on
Clinton
January
was
20th. All the information that they're talking about occurred prior to him being at the White House.
Right, but it was
So
working for the transition. And I'm
okay,
just
then-
saying, is there
then-
any
then
obligation
ask
you
him to-
have?
Not at the White House. Everything that is being questioned occurred prior to January 20th.
But you actually were the delivery of those documents?
But you're acting as if you had no custodial or
Right,
ethical
the
responsibility of your own transition. That's all I'm trying to
No,
get at.
and I guess the question is that what
He was not making calls as a private citizen. He was making
I-
it as a future national security advisor.
I understand that, and right now to ask the White House to produce documents that were not in the possession of the White House is ridiculous. I got John.
Thanks a lot, Sean. A few weeks ago, when General Flynn's attorney wrote to the Senate Intelligence Committee suggesting some sort of immunity deal for General Flynn, I asked you a question about whether the White House would be invoking executive privilege. And your response at that time was, no, we have no problem with General Flynn testifying. He's free to do so. We won't be invoking any type of privilege. Does that also apply to any documents that the White House may have relating to General Flynn, his service, his short service as the National Security Advisor to the President, and the time in which he served in the transition period as an advisor to the President-elect?
I think, look, when you ask, I know that when Chaffetz was asked that whether or not what he is looking into had anything to do with the White House, my understanding is he was very clear that had to do with his time prior to that. So talking about what his role is at the White House seems not germane to any of the questions that are being asked.
What about prior to his service at the White House?
Well, that, again, would have to go to General Flynn. There's nothing that is being asked for with respect to his service here at the White House. The documents that Major was referring to rest within the Department of Defense. My understanding is that they were provided.
And the overall issue of privilege, would you be invoking
We're not.
privilege?
I'm not at this time to answer that question. I don't know the answer. There's nothing that would that I'm responding to on that particular matter. Trey.
Sean, generally speaking, within the Trump administration, how important is it to the president that everyone working for this administration is honest on their security clearance forms?
Very. And if they don't, then they're going to be, investigated. I mean, but you assume, look, everybody fills out forms all the time. All of us, in some point, we sign our name and swear under oath that everything that's done there. So I think each and every one of us, in different ways, signs our names and agrees to abide by the information that we provide.
Just following up, do you know if the president is aware of the comments that were made by the House Oversight Chairman today? And does he agree at all with the assertion that it seems as though General Flynn was not in compliance with the law?
I'm not. And again, that would be a matter for them to look into, not for us. Caitlin.
Does the White House consider Mike Flynn's payment from Russia today to be a payment from a foreign government?
I don't know. That was, again, all of that occurred prior to his service.
Your White House. Does this White House consider a payment from Russia today to be a payment from a foreign government?
I understand. What I'm saying is everything that he did was prior to coming to this White House. So for us to determine someone else's thing as a consultant.
Today, do you consider that to be a payment from a foreign government?
I'm sorry, if what?
If someone took money from Russia today.
If they were an employee of the White House, absolutely. But again, I don't know the exact circumstances. Everything that is being discussed occurred prior to his employment at the White House, occurred as a consultant. And so whatever he did, as long as he did it in compliance with the law, as every one of us as a citizen has the right to do, that's up to an individual to do and then comply with the law.
To follow up on that, why wasn't he more closely vetted during the transition period?
Well, again, you fill out forms, and
I feel like the White House and the Trump transition team should have known about this before they were having him come to the White House.
Well, again, you fill out the forms, you do an investigation, you do a background check. Every employee gets that background check done, and they have a security clearance, and they fill it out, and That's how everyone operates under the same guise.
I have two questions, but I want to follow up on that. So you're saying that it's a problem with the process of vetting, the vetting process, and not
No,
that
I'm just saying
your-
that, I'm not saying it's a process of vetting. I'm saying that every single person who comes to work in here at a certain level is required to fill out the same form, an SF-86, and that background check is adjudicated. You rely on that person when they sign their name, and then investigators to pick it up. But there's always going to be in the case of people who had a prior clearance, that between the time that they filled it out and had it adjudicated, they could have engaged in something, and whether or not they updated that or not is always the onus is on the individual.
I do want to ask you really quickly about the wall. Yesterday, President Trump reportedly said that he's going to delay pushing the wall through.
Yeah, he
on
did
the
not.
Hill. And so can you just clarify
Yeah.
what the status of that is?
Yeah.
Happening when?
Thank you. The president made it very clear. I think he tweeted about this earlier. His priorities have not changed. There will be a wall built. It's important to prevent human trafficking, gangs like MS-13 from coming into the country, the flow of illegal drugs, illegal immigration. There is a national and economic safety issue by having a wall that ensures our country's safety. And there's plenty of planning that can be done in FY17. We're going to continue. Our priorities are clear going into FY17, the remainder of budgeting for that, and we'll continue to ask for more in FY18.
So it's delayed for now.
No, I
until
didn't. No.
it's-
I never. No one said delayed. No. There's a No. There's two budget processes. Right now, we're going to end FY17 this week. We hope to continue to get funding in that, as the president laid out, for both border security and homeland security and national defense, as we've always maintained. And then when we come to FY18, that starts at the end of or beginning of October, the end of September, in that next budget, we'll go for the next group of money.
So
But
you expect partial funding? this
I
time
think
around?
we're going to we've made our priorities very clear as we continue to negotiate, and I think nothing has changed on the president's priorities. Sure, one more.
The president has threatened to withhold cost-sharing payments from insurance companies, so is that still the case?
He hasn't. I think we've made it very clear that we want to repeal and replace Obamacare, and I think we continue to see there's a prop up right now, and that's why we need to act as soon as possible to get an insurance plan in place, a new insurance plan system in place that will protect people's insurance and not have these skyrocketing costs. But we have an artificially propped up insurance system right now because of these payments, and I think that we've got to make sure that we do everything we can as quick as we can to put a system in place that will solve that. Jonathan.
So just to follow up on the two big topics, the wall and on Flynn. First, on the wall, just want to be clear. So is the president no longer insisting that there is money for the wall in this current appropriations bill?
The president's priorities are clear for FY17. There's a lot of things that we can do in the remaining months up until the end of September for planning and making sure that we get everything that we need, funding that we need for that aspect of things. And then as we go into FY18, we'll continue to ask for more. I don't think anything's changed.
So the president is not insisting that he has money for actual construction of the wall?
Look,
in this
I'm not going to
current
get,
bill?
we're still in discussions with the House and Senate leadership, but I think the president's been very clear that he wants a wall. He wants it done as soon as we can do it. There are things that we need to do to protect our country, like human trafficking, the flow of illegal drugs and gangs, that are going to make sure that while we've achieved a significant drop in illegal alien border crossing, down 61% since January, that this is something that's in our country's long-term national security interest.
The actual construction can wait until the fall?
No, it's not a question of wait until the fall. I think there's a lot of things that have to happen. It's like any construction.
you can start
Well, you've got to
construction.
start doing some planning and things, and so we will take the first steps now, and then we will continue to seek funding through the FY18 and further budget to make sure that the actual it is completed.
And on Michael Flynn, does the president feel that he was misled by General Flynn?
I think the president made a decision a while ago because General Flynn was not straight with the vice president at the time and let him go. I think he stands by that decision, and it's up to others to review all this information that's coming out.
But does he now feel that he also wasn't straight with him?
I don't know.
at the beginning during
A lot of the
transition?
facts are still coming out, Jonathan. So I know the president made a decision a couple months ago. It was the right decision, and we've moved on, and we've continued to stay focused on.
At the time he made that decision, he said that Flynn was the victim of a media witch hunt, and said he was a good man that had been a victim of this
So
witch hunt.
let's
Does he still feel
I think
that,
all
or
the
is that-
facts are still coming out on that. Let's see where they come. I think he made a decision a few months ago. He stands by that decision. John.
Thank you, Sean. Two questions. Last night, the president said, and some have reported it, some pretty sensational charges about the Iran treaty We know he's called it the worst agreement in history and the worst he ever saw himself. But he also said that at the time of the treaty, the government in Iran was on the verge of collapsing. And that is something I don't believe that has ever been reported before. He also said that the unfrozen assets, the billions, they're not used to fund terrorists, but they were in Swiss bank accounts. Is this based on intelligence reports he's received or other information?
I'm not going to get into what the president knows, but there's a reason that we are undergoing an interagency process right now to look at the deal. Yeah, Jessica.
I had a second question.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay. On General Flynn, anyone who is at his level and some levels below undergoes an investigation by the FBI with a final report. Was the president ever given a final security report by the FBI on General Flynn?
I don't know how. I don't. He was the head of DI of the Department of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He had an existing clearance. Jessica.
So on North Korea, Sean, if you could just talk a little bit more about the overall efforts that the administration is making. We note the United Nations meetings yesterday. Now you've got an up-and-coming meeting with Congress. Are you, as an administration, trying to get a coalition together to build a stronger diplomatic case around actions against Pyongyang?
Yeah, well, I think you saw Ambassador Haley yesterday in the discussion that the other ambassadors who visited the White House engaged in a very robust discussion with respect to North Korea, both as a group and then with the president. So obviously, the more that we can solve this diplomatically and continue to apply pressure on China and other countries to use the political and economic tools that they have to achieve a goal in stabilization in the region, but also to tamp down the threat that North Korea faces, I think that is something that we all share.
How would you characterize the administration's overall strategy on the DPRK?
Well, I think it's ongoing, and I think we've seen very positive signs with respect to a nation like China. I think the relationship the president built with President Xi down at Mar-a-Lago is definitely paying off dividends. And this president's relationships that he's building with heads of government is clearly reestablishing America's place in the world and getting results for the country. Kayla.
Will you articulate that strategy on Wednesday when you have the meeting of the senators?
I'm sorry?
Will you be able to articulate that strategy and put a finer point on it for the senators?
Just to be clear, that meeting is a Senate meeting led by Leader McConnell, just utilizing our space. So that is their meeting. So we're not there to talk strategy. They are going to be briefed by the. Can I answer the question? Major, you want to come on up?
I'm just asking.
I understand there are four brief. Hold on.
Characterize it as you presenting your strategy to the U.S.
There are
Senate?
four briefers that are coming up to talk about the situation in North Korea. They will be briefed by. This is a Senate-led meeting that they are getting. Those four briefers will share to them the current situation in North Korea. Kayla.
Strategy to be articulated, though?
Huh?
So the senator should not expect.
Well,
to
no,
hear your
obviously the
strategy.
Secretary of State and others are going to talk about our posture and the activities that we're undergoing, and Chairman Dunford will lay out some of the military actions and the way that they see the lay of the land. I mean, they're going to answer questions as they routinely do on a situation like this. Kayla.
How long would you reasonably expect the government to take to be fully staffed with essential personnel to draft, negotiate, and implement complicated policies like tax reform and put forward something that's a little bit more meaty than just broad principles?
Well, I think we're going to we'll have something to share with you tomorrow, and then we're going to continue to work with allies and individuals who want to be part of this process. That conversation has really kicked off in earnest with members of the House Ways and Means Committee and Senate Finance Committee, the leadership, and so we will continue to engage in that discussion. Then outside stakeholders to try to get a plan really put together and details laid out in the next several weeks once we make the announcement tomorrow.
But what progress have agencies been able to make in carrying out the executive orders that the president has put forward? Because today is actually the deadline for the regulatory reform officers to be in place. How many of those are there?
I don't have a number on that. I can talk to our personnel office and get back to you. But I think we have been able to work with, in many cases, and I think I went over this early on in the process, but we installed, we called beachhead teams during the transition process. We put 400 plus individuals into these departments that in most cases transform into Schedule C employees. So we have been able to be up and running on almost every one of these in a very, very early process when you look at the totality of how we handled the transition of government. So, Eamon.
Thanks, Sean. Staying on taxes for a minute, can you give us a sense, the president said that he's going to present this plan tomorrow. Can you give us a sense of what we're going to see and when we're going to see it?
No. We're going to wait till tomorrow. I think we'll have plenty of time to talk about that tomorrow. Adam?
Just a bit of color. The president on Friday, when he announced that it was going to happen on Wednesday, aides here at the White House and over at Treasury seemed a little bit surprised to find out that this was coming as early as Wednesday. Can you tell us who inside the White House and at Treasury the president told he was going to announce this on Wednesday before he made the announcement?
I think tomorrow we'll have a great plan for you to see. Adam?
The Secretary of the Treasury actually said that the goal with tax reform is to spur growth of 3% or more, but already people are worried about deficits, and Taxpayers for Common Sense put out a statement saying that growth, hogwash, growth is the magic pixie dust policymakers throw on economic plans to make them appear fiscally sound when they are not. What would you say to Republicans on Capitol Hill who are worried about this being a tax reform that would blow a hole in the deficit and in debt?
Well, I will wait until tomorrow. You can see the plan. But I think obviously we've got to do everything we can to get economic growth going and job creation going. The president's made tremendous headway on the regulatory front, and he's going to do everything he can on the tax front. But we've talked about this before. I mean, if you look at the corporate side in particular, we have become largely uncompetitive because of our rates. And I think the more we can do to make our country, our businesses, our manufacturers in particular, more competitive, that's good for American workers. It's good for our economy. It's good for economic growth. And I think the president, as I noted, I mean, when you look at the regulatory side of what he has done, it has really helped a lot of industries start to see light. And that's why I think you see the confidence levels in so many surveys so strong under this president, because he's achieved real results already. So I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll talk about the tax plan. Thanks.
Welcome back. That was the Sean Spicer press briefing. This is the post show at Right Side Broadcasting for the Sean Spicer press briefing. We'll be talking about what Sean Spicer and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross talked about today. We'll be hearing your comments. We'll be taking your calls. So we'd love to hear from you what you thought about the briefing, about what came up during the briefing. You can either direct message me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, or email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv, or call us. Give us a call. Let us know what you're thinking. 202-470-0049. Bunch of different things covered today. I want to first, Joe, just say that in addition to covering I know some people were asking about this if you didn't hear on the pre-show. In addition to covering the Sean Spicer briefings this week, we will be going and covering President Trump's rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on Saturday. So mark that off on your calendars. If you like watching the rallies, watch it with us. We'll be covering it all day. We'll start several hours earlier. We'll talk to the people in the crowd. We'll show you all the introductory speakers and all of President Trump's speech, and then interview people in the crowd after the rally when the rally's ending. So it'll be a fun day there. Just if you like that kind of coverage, you like seeing us go to the rallies, you like seeing us give you an alternative to the mainstream media for breaking news coverage and coverage of Sean Spicer's press briefings, please consider donating, because we rely on your donations to stay on the air. We can't stay on the air without your support. One way to donate is you can go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. But also, if you're interested, we recently started a Patreon page where you can sign up to make a monthly donation, and in return, you get like cool freebies from Right Side Broadcasting. There's like a gift bag, and there's like you can get like a song written to you for you by music expert and composer who works at Right Side, Jake Seals. So there's all kinds of stuff you can get, and if you're interested in that, go to www.patreon.com/RSBN, and Patreon is Patreon. And you can also always donate by, if you're watching on YouTube, clicking at the $ at the bottom of the chat room. So let's talk about some of the stuff that Sean Spicer talked about today. And also, I think, before I do that, though, I do want to get to, I got a message or two during the briefing, and I want to answer that. Yeah, Andrew Sova had written, if you don't know, tomorrow is Melania Trump's birthday. I didn't know that. So thank you, Andrew, for letting us know, and letting the viewers know if you didn't know. Okay, let's talk about what happened in the briefing. So Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, was there. He came in first. Sean Spicer brought him in, and he actually spoke for a little while and answered a bunch of questions. And the main thing he was here to talk about, though, was the new tariffs that President Trump has put on a certain kind of Canadian wood. I believe it's called softwood. It's a wood that's used often for housing. And the background here is there's this very long-running dispute between the U.S. and Canada over this type of wood, and the U.S. claims that Canada subsidizes the production of this wood in Canada, and then they have this, and then they take some of their wood that they make, the subsidized wood, and they dump it in the U.S. market, and they sell at these really low prices, which hurts U.S. wood manufacturers. And from 2005 to 2016, or actually, was it 2005 or it was till 2015. So either in 2005 or 2006 this agreement came into effect, and it went till 2015. There was an agreement between the U.S. and Canada covering this type of wood. But that agreement expired in 2015. They haven't reached a new agreement yet. And the U.S. government is claiming that Canada has been dumping their wood again. And as punishment for this, Wilbur Ross said that the U.S. will be imposing tariffs on this kind of wood coming in from Canada. The tariffs will range from like 3% to 25%, depending on which the company is. But also, I've seen this number, like there's certain companies that have a specific number imposed on them, and on other companies the tariff will be 20%. So, and there's a significant amount of tariffs, and there were a number of questions on that. And one thing a couple things Wilbur Ross said is Secretary Ross said he didn't think that this was going to affect the more general good relationship between, President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada. Also, it was asked, hey, since this wood is used in building housing, might this raise the price of houses a lot? And Secretary Ross said he didn't think it would, because he said wood was not one of the big costs of housing, and that when you buy a house and when you construct a house, wood is not a really big cost factor there. And he said because of that, he didn't think that the prices would go up that much for housing. So that is something that was talked about. And then he talked about some other issues. Wilbur Ross, did I write down anything particularly exciting that I thought, I will say this, Wilbur Ross also was asked about growth, and he said with all the actions President Trump is taking, he thought the U.S. economy should grow at 3% or higher. And also, I know somebody asked Wilbur Ross about General Flynn, and he said something like, is that really a question about commerce? So he certainly stayed up there for a while answering questions, Wilbur Ross, before Sean Spicer took over and did his normal answering of questions. So I'm just going to check real quick before I get to what Sean Spicer talked about. Going to check here and see about if I don't want to ignore any messages I might have gotten here. No to the Mark said, night and day from then and today, did Josh Earnest ever provide real answers or bring in Commerce Secretary to answer questions? Crooks. So no to the Mark. You think you like these briefings better than the Josh Earnest briefings under President Obama, it's apparent. Now, that's a good question, Mark. No to the Mark. I don't know if the Commerce Secretary ever was brought into a press briefing. I actually think it's kind of neat when Sean Spicer brings in these cabinet people, cabinet members to a press briefing. More opportunity to ask these people questions, which I think is good. And I was actually wondering a similar thing myself. I was wondering, did this happen under President Obama? I just can't remember. Maybe I'll look that up. But if somebody has a good memory about that, feel free to write in. But I like it. Why not? It's like the special guest you get on some days. And but I also think what I also like is, it's not just the cabinet member coming in and reading a speech. The cabinet member actually will answer some questions. So Wilbur Ross today came in to talk about the Canada tariff stuff, but he stuck around and answered some questions, and I like that. And it also, as you know, we hear a lot of similar questions in the press briefings from day to day, and also, you can kind of tell a lot of times what's going to be asked about. But when you have somebody like Wilbur Ross in there, you get all different kinds of questions you're not used to hearing, which I think is refreshing. So thanks for writing in, No to the Mark. And let me pull up my email here. So just to say again, as we're on the post show, and as we're talking about what went on in the press briefing today. Feel free to comment and write in or call in. You can call in at 202-470-0049, or you can email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv, or you can direct message me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner. I do know that our producer, Micah Messer, wanted to call in about some things, and he's going to be calling in soon, so we look forward to that. He had some things he wanted to talk about regarding what was talked about at the press briefing. Let me go over some more things that came up during the press briefing that I wrote down that I thought were particularly interesting. So Sean Spicer was asked about the meeting tomorrow between all the senators. I don't know if they're all going, but all the senators were asked to go to the White House for a briefing about North Korea. And Sean Spicer, on the one hand, he didn't make it sound like it was like some big, let's plan some huge strategy meeting. So what he said is that, he said Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Dunford will lay out some of the military actions for the senators coming tomorrow. But he also said it's like a Senate-led meeting. So there wasn't a lot of concrete information given out about the meeting. But it didn't seem to me to be like a meeting where they're all going to sit down and figure out the concrete strategy for. He said it sounded more to me like he was suggesting that this was a meeting where the Senate could get some information, but not in a meeting where they would decide what was going to happen on this impending. It wasn't like, hey, let's have an emergency meeting. We have to decide by tomorrow what we're going to do about North Korea. At least that's not the impression I got. It seemed to be more of we're going to provide the Senate with some information and a briefing and let them ask questions. But who knows what the meeting will actually be. That's the general impression I got from what I heard from Sean Spicer. Let's see, what else did he say that I wrote down here? So, there were some questions about how, there were a number of questions about the border wall and about the funding for it, and talking about how President Trump right now is not going to be asking for, or having the Republicans in Congress ask for border wall funding, specifically in the spending bill that's supposed to be approved this week to take us till the end of the fiscal year, which I think is September or October of this year. So, but a spending bill has to get passed by the end of the week so the government doesn't shut down. President Trump initially hinted that he wanted that he was going to ask for money for the border wall and insist on that in this spending bill, but that's no longer the case. And so Sean Spicer was asked, questions like, is the wall being delayed? And, one thing he said in response is, what he talked about is, he pointed out that in the spending bill, he said there will be funding for Border Patrol. So it's not like there's no funding in the spending bill that's being proposed to control immigration from Mexico. But he said he was confident that they would get funding later this year, and he also talked about getting funding next year. So it sounded like getting the funding for the border wall, according to the White House, is going to be this ongoing process. And he said we'll take the first steps now. And he said there will be a wall built. Sean Spicer said that, and he said that President Trump's priorities have not changed. So he expects some funding to come this year, some funding to come next year in the future. I also saw I've seen, one of our readers wrote in about what Rush Limbaugh said about Trump's position on the border wall, and I saw another tweet about this during the break, which was somebody writing that Rush Limbaugh said something today about that reportedly Rush Limbaugh, according to this tweet and according to this viewer who wrote in, was saying that Trump was caving on the border wall funding and was not an approval of that. I haven't heard the actual show, but that's something I heard, which I thought was interesting. And as I said before, And as I said before, there does seem to be a split among Trump supporters on this whole, whether she should insist on the border wall funding in the spending bill that's going to get passed this week. Well, hopefully it will get passed this week. It's going to get proposed this week to avoid a government shutdown. And some people I've heard who are Trump supporters have said, this is really bad. He shouldn't be abandoning this right now. And some others have said, well, I think maybe we should trust him, and that maybe it's better that the government doesn't shut down and let him wait till later. And they're okay with waiting till a little later to get funding for it. So a lot of disagreement. We do have on the line right now, I believe, Micah Messer, our producer. Micah, hello. How are you doing today?
Hey, Steve, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. So I heard, Micah, you had some thoughts you wanted to give about some things that were talked about during Sean Spicer's briefing today. Am I correct?
That is absolutely correct, Steve.
So what would you like to start with, Micah?
Well, actually, I'd like to start first off with the definition of softwood.
Okay.
Softwood is like pine, cedar, and things like that. They're evergreens. So all the hardwood won't be affected by this at all.
So you're talking about, this is just Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary, in the press briefing, talked about how there's going to be this tariff put on softwood coming in from Canada, and you're pointing out that softwood is a certain kind of wood and it will not affect the hardwood coming in from Canada.
Correct. But then again, the majority of the wood that's used in the housing market is softwood.
Mhm.
So, I could easily see when things like this happen, tariffs, there's going to be probably about a 5% increase just based upon the percentages there. It can go up to about 5% increase on the price. But what people have to remember is that ultimately it'll force the U.S. forestry to improve, and therefore it'll basically be overcome by a free market. And the prices won't be increasing, they'll actually be decreasing over a long period.
Well, you're saying that if the prices of wood go up in the short term, it'll spur wood producers in this country to produce it for less. Am I correct? I'm just making sure I'm getting your point correct, Micah.
Partially. You also have the fact of right now, as you mentioned, there a huge influx of wood into our current market by Canada, and for a really low price. And that really messes up the free market and puts people out of business here in the United States. What this will do in turn is actually bring in, workers, and will boost the forestry industry in general, which means more competition, more wood in the market from U.S.-based manufacturers, which will bring the cost back down.
I see. Interesting. And another thing to point out about this whole wood tariff thing is that, for all you know, it might be short-lived. As we were talking before, there was an agreement for about 10 years until recently about this kind of wood, and perhaps this tariff is meant to be like, it's not, maybe part of the idea of this tariff is to say, hey Canada, look, we're serious about this, so let's work this out so we can not have this tariff anymore. Now I don't know if they'll work it out, but it's certainly possible, I would think.
Absolutely. So. I definitely think the Secretary kept going away from answering that specific question, but I definitely think this is a move, a political move as well as an economic move to say, hey Canada, listen, we like you and all, but you have to play just like the rest of us, and you can't be doing this to us.
Yep. And speaking of politically, also another thing it could be is maybe politically it's like it's a way for the Trump administration to show that they care about American workers, and so maybe that was part of the reason for them to go public with it, or maybe that actually even factored into their choice to put this tariff on rather than maybe negotiate a little more and see if it could be worked out. I don't know. I'm just saying there's, as we're saying, there's lots of different factors that could be at play here. But appreciate your input on the tariff issue, Micah. And you have other stuff you want to talk about too, correct?
Yeah. This whole General Flynn thing at this point is kind of ridiculous. I think you kind of agree with me, Steve. Why are they still on this? They're so focused in on this, they're missing all the good things that are occurring. And the FBI is literally their job to investigate people. And so my point of view is let the FBI do their job and let them investigate if they want to investigate. It's their job to investigate the government. And so, if we can't trust the FBI to investigate our own officials, then we are truly lost.
Yeah, and it's I think I agree with you, like how much attention was being paid to this during the press briefing, because I thought it was going to be asked about, but they were asking about it a lot, and it's one of these things where the amount of time spent on it in the press briefing versus the importance, I think, to the world in general and to the lives of average Americans, and as a story in itself, I think the ratio is out of whack, like I thought it was with the Nunes thing, and it's just as I was talking about in the pre-show, he's not in the administration anymore. And even, and Sean Spicer, he didn't deny that General Flynn did something illegal. He said maybe he did. If he did, it'll get investigated. So I don't see, it's not like the administration's like trying to cover up something that General Flynn did. So I just don't see why it warrants so many questions in the briefing. I don't know about how you felt about that in terms of the number of questions it got.
I maybe one or two, okay, I understand that, but when it started about 10 minutes worth of just General Flynn, and that's to me, that's the media doing a disservice because all the questions were already answered. They were just re-asking them.
Yeah, and they're going to keep asking, and I'm sure if you turn on today, I'll get angry because we'll have the TVs on here in the office, and like all the news stations will be on. It'll just be, and I was talking about this before. Just they'll cover it so much, and I just feel like there's so much else to be covered. Like for example, I bet they'll spend some time covering General Flynn that they could be covering. What are the different tax reform proposals on corporate taxes that President Trump might propose, and what might be better than others and stuff. And so I'd like to see more coverage on policy stuff like that, but I'm guessing we will see instead lots of General Flynn stuff.
I would agree with you on that. I think the media could definitely do more work on the policy side and focusing on what could be occurring tomorrow when that comes rolling out. But I also think they should actually focus a little bit on North Korea. I know they throw things out there here and there, but they really kind of don't get into the depths of the whole North Korea issue. They just kind of glaze over the top of it.
Yes.
Which I think is again another disservice.
And that is also it's like North Korea. They either it seems like the media they really focus on it a ton or not at all. And I've just been reminding people during our Spicer coverage this week of just like they didn't go away. They could still test something at any time. And President Trump. I saw something he said this morning, and I can't remember where it was. But and he might have said this last night, so I wish I could remember where it was. But there was a recent quote from him where he just again said something like, "People have been ignoring this way too long. We can't ignore it anymore. It has to get fixed." And that's really serious. That's a strong position, and that suggests like something's going to happen one way or the other. Like either North Korea will reach a deal with us, or there'll be some military action. But like. I agree with you. It's a really important issue, and it hasn't gone away. And so, I always like when there's more coverage of the North Korea issue.
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Micah.
At some point, there will be military actions. Because you have to understand the whole point of view of North Korea and their leaders, and to them is, we have to get nuked or they're going to kill us. Like that's their fear, and which is not the case, but that's just how they think. And what's going to happen is, all this economic pressure on North Korea, which I don't disagree with, from China and from the U.S., is going to make North Korea do something rash, whether that's using a nuclear device or conventional warfare, attacking South Korea or China or Russia. We don't really know. But it's a tense situation, but it has been for the last 50, 60 years. And what people have to realize is this is a very long, ongoing, struggle and issue that's been going on. But it is kind of getting a little more tense because now the U.S. isn't going to take any more. We're basically saying we're done giving ground. You have to not develop nuclear weapons, or we are going to do something. And I do see a possibility of a quick action strike, which would neutralize the either the head of the government or neutralize their ability to produce any type of weapons.
Yeah, I certainly think, Micah, that is a definite possibility, just because they're so close now, from reports I've read, to being able to miniaturize nuclear weapons and develop missiles that could hit the continental U.S. And so it's getting to the point where it's like, if we're going to stop them, it's got to be done soon. And if, like you say, the North Korean government's view is we need to develop nuclear weapons to have as like a safety measure so that we can't get overthrown or taken out by anybody else, they're going to not stop working on them. So it really could come to a point where President Trump is faced with like, okay, we either take military action or they have nuclear weapons on missiles that can hit the United States. To me, President Trump's rhetoric has suggested that he ultimately would take military action in that case. We'll see what happens, but I do agree that it bears watching. Now, Micah, you're going to be traveling with us to President Trump's rally this weekend, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And have you ever been to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Micah? I have not.
I have not, no. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too, and we're looking forward. We will be out there covering all the people and talking to people in line and stuff like that. So I think it'll be a cool, fun experience. And Micah, anything else you wanted to talk about today?
Not really. I think the whole wall issue is not an issue anymore. Whether he funds it or not, it's obviously clear that when you enforce the current laws, they don't want to come here anymore. So.
Oh, you think it's like less of an important issue because you think if the laws are being enforced, you're going to have less of a problem with people wanting to come here anyway. And there's been reports that the number of people coming over has dropped since President Trump took office.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting point as well. Well, Micah, thank you for your intelligent commentary and your perspective on these issues. Appreciate you calling in. If somebody wants to follow you on Twitter, where should they do that?
They can do that at Micah J. Messer. That's at MICAHJMESSER.
Great. Thanks so much, Micah.
No problem. Have a good day, Steve.
Talk to you soon, Micah. That was our producer, Micah Messer. He will be helping us cover the President Trump rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I will be in a car with Micah and Liz driving up there at the end of the week. And if you would, we're not flying because we can't afford to fly. Look, we're a small business here. We're doing our best to stay on the air to bring you coverage. If you'd like to donate, by the way, you can go to rsbn.tv/donate. You can click the $sign at the bottom of the chat room next to the broadcast. Or if you want to make a recurring donation and get some cool right side freebies and gifts in return for that, check out www.patreon.com/RSBN. And also, thank you to the moderators for moderating the chat today. Much appreciated, as always. So let's see here. We're going to be on for a little while longer. If you'd like to call in, 202-470-0049. Feel free to also email me, steve.lookner@rsbn.tv, and reach out to me on Twitter at Lookner, at LOOKNER. You can direct message me there. We'll be on for about 10 more minutes today. And also, what was I going to say when I was talking about that? Please subscribe to us on YouTube, on Right Side Broadcasting on YouTube, and click the notifications bell when you do so you'll get notified about all our videos as soon as they get posted. And if you want, follow us on Twitter at RSB Network. And Jake Seals, who's producing today, doing his usual great job producing, you can follow him at Jacob RSBN Music. All right, let me check here. Let me refresh some things here. And I also had some other things I wanted to talk about in terms of things that that Sean Spicer said today. Hold on a second. All right, so what else did we have? We had so a couple things that I had written down that I hadn't spoken about yet. So when Sean Spicer was asked these questions about General Flynn, and we were talking about this with Micah before, he did say anyone on the White House staff who is dishonest filling out forms will be investigated. So again, the White House isn't trying to cover up or General Flynn or argue that he didn't do anything wrong. They seem to be supportive of investigations on him into whether he did anything wrong filling out these forms. Now, I will say, someone might say, well, so I saw one tweet today which said something like, look, if General Flynn didn't accurately fill out these forms and didn't declare this money that he was paid, that he was supposed to be paid, either the White House knew and claims they didn't know, or they didn't know, which, and this person said if they didn't know, then that's a failure of due diligence on their part. Now, I can understand this argument that, if he did take this money from Russia and Turkey and they didn't know that, they should have known that. I don't know enough about how due diligence works. You'd like to think that if somebody's going to be national security advisor, this is something you could definitely find out. Maybe they have a reason why they didn't find out. Maybe they thought they knew him and thought they wouldn't suspect that he would withhold this stuff. I don't know. And look, maybe there is a world in which they're now thinking in the White House, yeah, we should have done better due diligence on Michael Flynn, and they don't want to admit it for PR reasons. Now, we could argue about if that's the case, should they admit it or not? Maybe they think it looks bad for them to admit it. I don't know. So there is that aspect of it, but I don't. So, maybe you could argue that this might show that they didn't do due diligence on Michael Flynn. But in that case, it's just, again, it's not as serious as they're trying to cover up some crime Michael Flynn did. And also, again, they fired Michael Flynn. He's not working there anymore. So I think everyone can relax a little bit on this. You can report on the Michael Flynn story, but don't make it like it's the biggest story in the world right now, because it's not, in my opinion. And also Micah's opinion, as we heard. Sean Spicer also said He said it's ridiculous for the House panel to ask for documents on General Flynn that are not in possession of the White House. I think he was talking about certain documents at the time that he said, as the White House letter said, that were that the Department of Defense had or previous White Houses would have had. Let's see. And he was asked, did General Flynn break the law? And he said that would be a question for him and a law enforcement agency. So again, to me, it's important to note that Sean Spicer today did not deny that Michael Flynn might have broken the law. He admitted it, and he said, let it. That's a question to be investigated by law enforcement. Okay, let me go back here for a moment. I also want to remind you that tonight on Right Side Broadcasting, our usual lineup is on. You can check out at 8 p.m. America First with Nick Fuentes, and at 9 p.m. The Wayne Dupree Show. So check those out tonight. Okay, great. Oh, and we have Christine on the line, Christine Bestian. You did call in the post show. How are you doing, Christine? Thanks for calling in.
You're welcome. I was thinking about your road trip and when you're interviewing the people at the events, and I would just like to offer a couple pieces of suggestion, a couple of suggestions. When you're talking to the people, maybe you should have an extra mic where your guests have a mic and you have a mic, because you lose in the translation along the way.
Now,
with all the background noise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this makes total sense, and I totally understand your suggestion. Now, I'm wondering, Jake, I think there might be a technical reason why we're in line. We don't have two mics. Jake, do you want to get on the line and address this? And if you have nothing to say, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. But
Sorry that I missed the question. Go ahead.
So what Christine was asking about is she had a good suggestion, which she said when we go to the rallies, like we're going to do on Saturday, and we talk to people in line, is it possible for us to have two mics? Because when we're using one mic, we miss stuff, and we're going back and forth between us and the people. And what I was saying is I think that's a great suggestion, but I also think there's a technical reason why it's hard for us to do that when we're in line. Do you know anything more about this?
When we're in the line for the rally?
Yeah, when we're outside, like outside the venue, and we're out talking to people in line.
Guys, when you are inside the arena, you're stuck behind the fence.
Oh, there's
and you're
that.
talking
Okay.
to the people.
Right.
And Maggie's on one side, you're on the other, Liz has got a mic, and you're talking to the people. You guys keep the mic to yourself, but you're not putting it on the people. You can't hear the people.
Right, and so there's two points here.
Additional mics, or one of you guys give up your mic so that the guest can have a voice.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So, Jake, I think in terms of additional mics, I think we only have two mics that we can use, correct, at the venue?
That's correct. The way that our camera is set up, we can only have... well, we did actually make that. We had one channel that was mono only, so it was to the left, and we actually figured that out and worked that out. But the wireless mics, the good ones, are really expensive. We can't use the cheaper ones because there's a lot of different frequencies and things going on in that area. So sometimes it can be a little difficult to have two different mics like that working. We do have a wired mic that we use sometimes as well. I don't remember what happened last time, but I know the rally before that we had two mics. So this last one, I think we only used the one. You were there, and I don't remember.
We will look into that. But also, yeah. Christine, your point about sometimes we do mess up and we miss what the person is saying, so we will pay attention to that. We're trying to get better at that. Also, another thing that happens is the way those interviews are, like, we don't necessarily know before an interview, like, whether it's going to be me and Liz or me and Maggie and the Liz. So a lot of times what we're doing, and we haven't worked out in advance, like, okay, you're going to hold the mic in front of the person and I'm going to talk or something like that. So that's something we will talk about before the next rally and try to get a little better system. Because I know it's like, it's bothersome when you want to hear what the person has to say and we've messed up and missed it. So your point is well taken.
You have hundreds of miles to work that out in the car now.
Yes, we do.
Yes, and I'll chime in.
Okay, guys, have a good time.
Thank you, Christine.
You too, Christine. I'll chime in one more time and say also, too, in terms of what goes on at the rallies, don't forget that because of the way YouTube's copyright policy is, it's very difficult for us to... when they're blaring the music, particularly at the end, we do have to cut down the volume sometimes and put music on in the background to try and block that, because what will happen is if copyright music is picked up on the stream, we will not make any money off of that. All of that money will go to whoever the copyright holder is of that particular song. Not to mention, too, you've been there, Steve. You can tell them how loud it is there, and sometimes it's just impossible, even if you're yelling into the mic, to be able to be clear to the people. So I just wanted to re-clarify that for people. There's a lot of people that do ask why we play our music. If you're new here and you don't watch anything other than our rallies, you know that we have all original music that plays that I create. The reason we have that in the first place is so that you're not watching just a static video with no audio, or listening to the not so fantastic royalty-free music that YouTube has. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, no, those are all good points to be aware of. So, yeah, if you have questions about the coverage, or you have like suggestions like Christine has, we'd love to hear from you. You know, you can always write to us at feedback@rsbn.tv. And yeah, the noise can sometimes be a real issue at the rallies. The one in Melbourne, Florida, I imagine was so loud I literally couldn't hear what people were saying right next to me, including like Margaret. Maggie. So and it also can make it, when it's loud in there, it can make it very tough for us to communicate with the home base here. So, but we will try to do our best to make sure we don't miss what people are saying, and try to work out some kind of more of a better system where we know in advance who's going to be holding the mic in front of the person, that kind of thing. So appreciate the suggestion. We have here. Eric Bazell wrote in, I feel the media is still distracting the public from the real story of crimes committed by Obama and Hillary that are worse than Flynn's by 100-fold. For example, when will someone cover the question, FBI or media, of when Hillary received millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia via her foundation? So you, Eric, would like to see more media attention paid to possible, you say, crime from the Obama and Hillary era. And one thing you're pointing out is that, we don't see really media coverage anymore of the Clinton Foundation. It's just sort of, it's funny because it's like, there's all this coverage of it during the campaign, and then because she's not president, it's just like never covered anymore. And it's not like the questions went away. So if you're someone who did have questions about that and thought there was, that there was wrongdoing there, I'm sure you still think that. It's not like that was all like, oh, we've shown that there's nothing, all this new evidence came out about it. But, the focus is on President Trump now because he's president. But Eric, you think there should be more coverage, and it's slanting way too much toward trying to find things wrong with President Trump and people who are associated with him. And so thank you, Eric, for the message. Let's see here. Okay, we only have a couple minutes here. We're going to wrap it up very, very, very soon. And let me just make sure we're caught up here. So just to remind you, tune in on Saturday for our coverage of the rally, President Trump, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, lots of coverage. We'll let you know when we're starting. If you want to know when we're starting, make sure you're subscribed to us on Twitter at RSB Network, because we'll tweet out when the coverage is going to start. It'll be several hours before the rally. And what else? What else can I tell you? So that's going to happen. We're looking forward to doing that. If you'd like to, I'll give a last plea. Help us cover the rally, stay on the air, bring you this kind of coverage. Once again, at rsbn.tv/donate, or once again, we have this Patreon site where you can make a recurring donation and you can get goodies in return from Right Side Broadcasting. That's www.patreon.com/rsbn. And you can always donate by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat room. Really appreciate it. A number of people have donated this week and said, use this for the trip to Harrisburg, and we will. It'll really help us cover the event. It's not cheap to be able to cover those events. We have to pay for internet. We have to rent a car, drive up there, all these expenses. So thank you for your donations. Pay for gas, all these things. Oh, I think we got one more message here. Let's see. Sightless Seer writes in, it always looks better for an individual or entity to admit their own small part and responsibilities, one's own missteps when aware of them, and do their best to rectify it, than to deny responsibility for even oversights. I will always think more highly of a self-disciplined individual capable of admitting fault and doing everything they can to rectify it. I see it as a sign of an individual who has a healthy self-power over their own ego. One does not need to apologize to admit fault, nor to rectify the mistake. So, Sightless here, I can't tell you, are you talking about Sean Spicer today? Or are you talking about Right Side Broadcasting? Are you talking about something else? It's an interesting point. I feel like maybe it's directed at something. I'm not sure what. But we have to go. So I'm going to sign off now. I want to say thank you to Micah Messer for calling in. Thank you so much to Jake Seals for producing. Great job, Jake. Thank you to the moderators for moderating the chat room. Thank you, and also the moderators at rsbntv.tv as well. Thank you to you for watching, and also all of your insightful comments and questions and suggestions. And we will be here. Let's see. If there's a rally, well, if there's, I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a briefing tomorrow, because I know President Trump also said he's going to make an announcement about the tax stuff tomorrow. Will he be doing that live somewhere? Anyways, if he's making an announcement, we'll bring it to you. Assuming we can cover it, which I'm guessing we would be able to. If there's a briefing, we'll bring it to you. If there's breaking news, we'll bring it to you. We will always bring this stuff to you because we want to be there for you to provide an alternative for news coverage, so you don't have to watch the mainstream media if you don't want to. You can watch us, or watch us along with them, whatever you want to do. And watch our shows tonight. As I said before, we have Nick Fuentes and Wayne Dupree on tonight, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern. And looking forward to covering the rally for you. It's going to be fun on Saturday. So for now, have a great... Oh, and also, follow if you want to follow me on Twitter, at LOOKNER. If you want to follow Jake on Twitter, at Jacob RSBN Music. And right side is at RSB Network. Have a great day. Enjoy your afternoon, and we will see you later.